There. Call the public hearing to order for the Tuesday, March 21 Planning Commission. And public hearing subject is proposed amendment to the boundaries and project plan of tax incremental district number 3.
Folks in physical copies, or we're gonna put it up on the screen?
I do have copies for them.
Okay,
I don't have it in this computer.
no problem. Anyone, you guys want a copy or?
I'll take one.
Sure. All right, so I can go ahead and get it started. My name is Josh Lowe, here from the Ellers. We're the village's municipal financial advisor. We've worked with them for a long time on everything municipally financial related, levy limits, budget, issuing debt, but I think most prominently tax increment districts, which is really the purpose of being here tonight. So we have an exciting project for tax increment district number 3. Originally, this district was created in 2005 and has been amended a couple of times. It's our second amendment that we've done for it. So first in 2019 was the first amendment. We added some new projects to be implemented within the district, and this one's going to add new territory. So I can go ahead and walk you guys through that. All right. Is anyone familiar with tax refinancing? Can I just give a quick overview, or is everyone on the same? Quick overview. All right. So really the purpose of tax increment financing is to find a new source of revenue for economic development or redevelopment projects in Somerset. So it's a very commonly used tool within and without Wisconsin. There are only a few states within the United States that do not have some form of tax increment financing. Okay. So normally when property taxes get paid to a village, in this case, every dollar that contributes is split in a couple of different ways. So the village certainly gets a share, but then every dollar also goes to the tech college, the county, and the school district, right? So those are the 4 entities that receive any property taxes that are contributed. Okay, so that's with or without a tax increment district. When a tax increment district is created, what really happens is any property taxes that are already in existence stay at that level until the tax increment district closes. Once the tax increment district closes, any growth that comes from the district then gets split back amongst the tax increment districts at that higher level. So really the point here is to allow growth to happen and then capture that property tax revenue, the increase, and funnel that back into projects that the village can use to benefit the district itself, whether that's infrastructure, new streets, development incentives, bring new utilities to a site that you're trying to encourage development on. So I just want to show this diagram quickly in the presentation, which kind of graphically shows what I'm describing. So in blue, this is what's described as the baseline property tax value. So whatever property taxes currently are paid in the geography that you're going to call in your district, in this case, it's TID 3, which encompasses a lot of downtown in Somerset, right? So those tax dollars that come in are the ones that get split between the other taxing jurisdictions that I mentioned, the village, school district, tech college, and the county, all getting that share, right? So before the tax increment district goes into effect, that's the baseline. And that is held constant through the entire life of the tax increment district. So whatever those entities are receiving in property taxes doesn't change. It doesn't go up, it doesn't go down. So that's the way their budget is fixed, right? So the idea here is that everyone's made better off in the long run, but no one's made worse off in the short run because of the tax increment district. Okay. As time goes on, we're going to freeze that base value. And then as new development comes in and starts creating new value, that's what's shown in the purple section right there, that triangle. So that goes up over time. All right. Everything that goes into that purple bar is what's captured, and those taxes get captured and given back to the village specifically for those projects that I mentioned. That's in this case, property acquisition, the intersection improvements. I think we also have some street lights and stuff that was involved in the 2019 project plan amendment. So those are the kind of things that you're using that revenue for, that is from the growth. Okay. The next step is we move to the green. When this district closes in 2033, that entire increased value now after termination, rather than that new value only getting used by the district, now the district is going to close, and now all of the taxing jurisdictions get to benefit from that increased property tax value that's now there once the district closes, okay? So that's why you're better off in the long run than you were in the short run, because now there's additional growth and development that has occurred, that what we're saying would not have occurred without the tax. And that's really the key finding, and the whole thing that this rests on is what we call the but-for test, that but for the development of this district and the infrastructure that was put in there, none of this growth would be possible at all, right? So if you take, say, a vacant parcel of land that's out there, it's probably been vacant for a reason, right? Because it doesn't have infrastructure there, it has challenging site conditions, any of those kind of elements that make it been difficult to build on. So that once you put the infrastructure there and you have those incentives, and after you do those projects, then the growth can happen for it. But without those projects or those incentives, it would still be vacant. So that's kind of the intuition. Okay. Does anyone have a question? Yes, sir.
Yeah, what if the property value never goes up? Where is the money coming from the taxes? And say their property value stays at $100,000, they pay $1,000 a year in taxes. If it never changes for 8 to 10 years, which I know it will, but I'm just saying, say it doesn't change for like 3 years, there's no money going into it then, right?
Well, you've got totally the right question, and that's a risky situation that we would counsel you to avoid going through one of these projects. So the riskiest way to do a tax increment district is you open one and then take on debt to build a street to connect it to, something else and hope that it can come to that. That's the hardest place to be, because that's kind of if you build it, someone will come model. And that's where you're in a risky place, because if you don't have value guaranteed, because you haven't negotiated anything with the developer from the front end to build there, you already got a liability that needs to.
I'm talking about the businesses that are already there.
Right.
Isn't that where
Well, in some cases, yes. So this is
the tip money's coming from?
right, but you still want to have vacant parcels around, and that's what we're trying to do with this particular district. We're trying to acquire new property so that it can be built on.
Okay, I'm just wondering where the money, so the money comes from the new buildings that are going in then for the tip for 8 to 9 years?
Yep, or an improved building.
Or improved, okay,
So if you do an extension, then eventually the local assessor will assess it at a higher rate,
right,
and then that can start contributing new increment revenue.
right, but if none of them,
If nothing happens, then
Then there's
you're right, there will be
no-
no
okay.
new value. So
Okay.
it's all about the growth and the
right,
value.
right, I didn't understand that part.
Nope, you got it right. Absolutely.
Oh, I do.
All right, any other questions on this slide before we move on? All right. Okay, so then we can then move into the specifics of this tax increment district. I mentioned a few minutes ago at the beginning, really the purpose of this amendment specifically is to add new territory to the district. So if you look at the map on the left-hand side that we put together with our friends at MSA, your engineers, the blue is the existing tax increment district representing downtown, right? It's the red parcels here are the ones that we're adding to the district. And so the ones that are kind of northeast of Spring Street, just a couple blocks from the Village Hall here, those are vacant and seem to be acquired by the village. And then we've got a few right across from Main Street that are also vacant that we want to bring into the district. The reason bringing in new vacant parcels is helpful because that's what gives you something to build on, which can then create new value in the district. And it's easier to do that than improve something that's already in existence, okay? So that's why we're here today, to look at those couple of parcels, right? Really, the main goal that we're looking at through all of this is to promote economic development and revitalization of downtown Somerset. So having those vacant parcels to be brought into the district is helpful to have a funding source for that. An important thing to note for this one, this is what's called the blight elimination district. That's something that the state of Wisconsin gives you the ability to declare to say that these parcels have had challenge in the past, and that's why we're asking you to be able to bring it into the district and use this kind of district type. A blight district gives you 27 years rather than the normal 20 in a mixed use district, because the state understands that there are particularly challenges related to dealing with districts that are already built out, right? There's already structure there, they need to be taken down, or possibly, in this case, we've got vacant districts that already have site challenges on it. So perhaps that's why, it's been hard to build on at this point. So you can use the blight definition for those kind of purposes as well. And what's meant by this box here in the bottom right, the required finding is that when you have a tax increment district that's been declared as blighted and you're trying to get those extra 7 years, what the state makes you demonstrate is that at least 50% of the area within the district has been designated as blighted. So since we have these blue ones in this map here, 100% of those are deemed blighted back in the day when we did it in 2005. And then more than half of the ones we're adding are blighted now. So that gets us to above 50% for the entire district. So that's a little bit of history from 2005. Bob, I don't know if you have any other comments on what the district looked like.
I have one question.
Yes, sir.
So the 4 red ones on the northeast side, you said are ones that you want to add in? Right, you
Yep,
said these
that's
ones are already added, or already
Yeah.
included, so you want to add those and those? How come it stopped before the pizza planet?
I think there was no reason to bring that in for connectivity purposes. The way, so here's just some details on how a map and a tax increment district gets formed. When you want to do it, you don't really want to bring in more properties into a district than are necessary, because when you do, you cut off the property taxes at that level. So if, the pizza planet ever puts like a second story above that or something like that, all that money goes into the district, and you might not want that, because that money, you might need it to go into the village's general fund to pay taxes as it normally does. Because any of that new revenue can only be spent on projects in the district. So you don't want to create too wide of an area, because then you wind up scooping up stuff that you don't really need.
Okay, one more. So one of these properties you're adding in, if they're already paying taxes right now, are they gonna get reassessed and then that amount will start going in the tip, or how is that gonna work with the properties that are already paying taxes?
It doesn't change at all. The number stays the same. Whether a property is in a tax increment district or outside of one, it doesn't get assessed at a different level for any reason.
Okay, I was just curious, because then how much of that money, zero would be starting to go into the tip then until the property value goes up, right?
Well, it shouldn't change just because it's in a TID. It should stay at the same level.
Is it TID or TIP? Because in here it says TIL.
Well, TID is tax increment financing, which is
Okay.
kind of like the dollar amount. TID is tax increment district, so that's the geography.
Okay, so I was just wondering, so what happens with the taxes they're paying now if they get added in?
So if you bring it in, this is where it changes. So the taxes they're paying now, if they get added in, will just still be part of that base value, that blue bar that I mentioned on that first slide. right?
Okay.
So those taxes don't change. When someone pays their property taxes, they all just go into the village. And at that point, it's just accounting to say whether how much goes to the county or the tech college or wherever. When you pay your taxes to a taxpayer, it makes no difference at all.
Right.
Right.
Okay. I just didn't know if it was gonna get divvied up different now that they got added in.
Go ahead.
Will part of it start going into the TID then, and a less amount will go to the school and to WITC and to the wherever else?
That's what happens. So if, the taxpayer pays $5,000, it's still gonna be $5,000. That's obviously a fake number. I don't know exactly what they pay. Right?
Right,
When it goes into the tax increment district, the district gets $5,000. Before it gets out of that 5,000, the village probably gets 40%, the county gets 30%, the school district gets 20%. Those are, again, big numbers. And the tech college gets the smallest portion. I think actually the school district gets like 40%, and then the village gets 30 and something like that. Usually it's a school district that gets a huge chunk of those.
thanks,
So you're definitely right. That's what happens.
thanks.
But that's also why you want to be selective about which parcels you bring in and for what reasons, right? So the ones that we wanted to bring in because the city wants to acquire them are these right here. The city already has them. City wants to acquire these, so it'll have its for its own use. So we have these two on the corner here. So why these two on the corner? Might you be asking? We needed to bring those in because a tax increment district needs to have a contiguous boundary. That's one of the DOR regulations. You can't just pick off this one and that one and some other one down south. They all have to be connected in some way, shape, or form. So we brought in those two on the corner there, so it can get us to jump across to these other ones that we wanted to be able to acquire and bring into the district. So there's always that kind of trade-off about, we want to bring in as few as we have to. But if we have to, we want to bring in ones that maybe don't have growth potential on them because they're already built out. Or we need to do it for connectivity purposes. So we have to have some kind of strategy and reason why we'd want to bring one in unless we have to.
And to
That's-
clarify, it doesn't mean that that particular property is blighted, because that's part of the calculation, that you don't have to have everything within that be blighted property. It's just.
That's right. It's also worth noting that even if we designate something as blighted, it basically is just, I don't want to say a meaningless designation, but it doesn't have any practical purpose. Like, it doesn't go on anyone's tax roll. It doesn't, it's not like a scarlet letter that someone sees like, well, that's designated a blighted parcel or something like that. So it must be worth less.
It
Like,
doesn't affect the resale of the property either, so.
right.
For marketing purposes.
I think that's a piece of misinformation that's totally worth dispelling in a public meeting.
Okay.
I've certainly done this in other places, and we had like loads of people in the back because they got a letter saying that something was blighted, and they're like, my house is not blighted. And my house is blighted. Okay. All right. Next page, anticipated project costs. So we really have the two that we want to focus on, and one is the land acquisition, and the other is the intercept improvements right there at Main and Spring. The land acquisition, the cost is about $450,000. The preliminary cost that we understand right now is for the intersection improvements is $300,000. We will be applying for some grants in the future. We pegged an amount right there at 100. So hopefully, maybe more than that. That would be fantastic. But I feel like intuitively 100 feels like a pretty good estimate for now. So a net cost to the village and the TID would be 200,000. Okay. So those are the anticipated projects that we want to bring into the district and project plan to make them eligible for TID financing. Without doing that, you can't spend money on them because they weren't listed in the project plan. But even if they're in a district and are eligible to receive tax increment financing, they still need to be approved by the village board prior to actually moving forward. So just because they're brought in to the district, just because we included them in the project plan does not obligate the board to move forward with them at any point. Usually when we do a new district creation, we'll put in a laundry list of different things that we think are possible to go over for the next 20 years after we create a new district, right? A lot of that is somewhat speculative based on what we think could happen in, is honestly a lot of times a vacant parcel, and we don't know when those things are going to be phased. The engineering of it could change. Maybe we get to year 10 and we don't need that project anymore. So what we're trying to do is think big and make sure that we're not limiting ourselves too much. So that's why something that gets into a project plan still needs to be approved by the village board once they get there. I mean, they're ultimately responsible for new infrastructure and the finances of the village when it gets that way. Any other questions there? All right. So the next page shows how we expect new increment and growth to come on those vacant parcels that I've already talked about. So this is kind of the building blocks of the cash flow, just focusing on the revenue side. All right. The way that property taxes move through after something gets built is the first year when something is constructed is kind of like year one. The following year after that, that property and whatever's constructed there will be assessed and put a value on that. And it's in year 3, after the property is constructed, do you actually start to see revenue generated from that? Okay. So the way that we started looking at the remaining parcels that we have is that, we're here in construction year 2023 and thinking that some of these new parcels that come in, particularly the one that the village wants to acquire now, is could be built on next year at maybe a value of 1.5 million. So if there's a large shopping complex or something that gets put there, I feel like that could be a reasonable value based on the size of that parcel. So if that's constructed in year 2024, it would then get valued in year 2025. And then by the time you get to year 2026, you can see the value increment go up there on that line, going from 4,000 approximately to now getting up to around 30,000 now that we have that new value there. Okay, then my next estimate is in 2027. Another parcel we could develop for around $1 million. And then that would start turning into revenue in year 2029. And then the total increment that you'd be getting from all the parcels that are in tax increment district number 3 would be about 46,000. Again, these are estimates. We don't have a developer's agreement with anyone specifically to start building on a parcel next year. But given the fact that we have them, that there's, you'll start doing marketing for it, they're pretty good locations, so we feel like that's a reasonable amount that could be generated from those parcels, okay? So, as I mentioned, in a tax increment district, a lot of this is speculative. We don't know exactly what the future is going to look like in some of these long-ranging districts. And we have to think about now near 2033. So there's a lot of possibilities open for Somerset during that amount. Also worth noting is that those estimates of tax increment that gets generated are based on the village's current tax rate, which is absolutely going to change sometime over the next 10 years, right? It's going to go up, it's going to go down. That's based on, you know, the county, the village, the tech college, and school district all setting their own levies, which are going to go up and down over the next several years. Any questions?
I got one quick one, just,
Sure.
so was it a good deal to buy that chunk of property then for the village to purchase that to?
I'll leave that to staff.
It accomplishes what we need to improve that intersection
Okay.
and some of the sidewalk that we've been trying to for a few years around here doing, so definitely. I feel it's one of our only mechanisms without impacting taxes and other projects, so. It was available, so. We felt.
I was just wondering if it was worth the value for everything there. I do have one more question, but I can't ask it. Can you talk with a previous owner and see if he'd be willing to donate any money back to the project there?
Sure, you can answer. Right.
All right, so I'm gonna move, this is the real meat and potatoes of a tax increment district plan, the cash flow. So we've got revenues, which we basically brought over from the previous page, and then we've got expenditures here in the middle in the green section. And so this is really the two pieces, the main pieces that we talked about, the property acquisition, and then the infrastructure improvements, the intersection improvements there. So the property acquisition is moving forward this year. The amount for that is $450,000. Looking all the way over to the right in the section for balances. The tax increment district's current fund balance is $424,000, right? So part of the plan here to pay for the property acquisition is to take that balance, that $424,000, bring some additional funds from the general fund of the village to pay for that property acquisition, right? And again, without the parcels being included in the tax increment district, we wouldn't have access to that $424,000 to acquire the property itself. The village would have to find additional funds, whether that's through issuing debt or taking funds from a different source or figuring that out. So we're going to bring that cumulative balance from existing rates and then some additional dollars from the general fund to pay for that property acquisition. All right. The intersection improvements are going to be funded, and correct me if I'm wrong, did we decide to do 2025 for that? Is that what's going to move forward, or is that going to happen this year?
I'll defer to Chuck on that. They've had some recent discussions. Oh, I'm sorry, we're short on a few materials.
Okay.
So, we don't know that if we started it, we could complete it in 1 year. Because we have a few things. Yeah, they're signal wise that are backed up.
We're exploring options because the poles that these irons typically sit on, there's a 44-week lead time.
44 weeks, okay.
And so we're looking at options or what we can do there if we can utilize what's out there currently, but we're expanding maybe the structural capabilities.
Yeah, that was my recollection when we talked a couple of weeks ago, that we initially had it pegged for this year, then that's why we posted it back to 125 to be conservative. So that's the timeline when we would be looking for that one. So we've got principal and interest there, and so we combine that through. Okay, right, so we had the property acquisition, talked about the intersection improvements being financed with that general obligation promissory note. We start to pay off the advance again, once cash flow starts to improve, once we start to get more development into the TID. The main thing that I want to focus you guys on is the balances over here on the right-hand side. As you can see here, we have an annual positive balance, so that means you're not going to the negative at all. So critical piece. And the most important thing when you're doing a tax increment district is in the bottom right, you see that cumulative balance, 2033, for $36,000. What that means is that the TID will be able to close with a positive balance. And basically, that's what we would call a feasible tax increment district cash flow, right? So that means you set out your goals to do as many projects as you possibly can in the district. The district supported itself for all that, did not need a subsidy from the general fund, or you didn't have to levy for any additional dollars at the end. As far as I'm concerned, that's a successful district right there. And that's where we projected it to end. And the nice thing is it also clears the advance repayment back to the general fund. We don't even need the last year for that either.
So
So
that balance goes back to the 4 entities then?
you got it. That's exactly what happens.
What if they could, is it possible if they wanted to do something quick to burn that up on a project then, and then, you know what I mean? Like if they wanted to add something fast, or I don't know what lights are, but what if all of a sudden in 8 or 9 years they need new lights? Could they burn that 36,000 up on?
That's a great question. Every tax increment district has an expenditure period that ends 5 years before the last year, right? The reason for that is because they don't want the communities issuing new debt right before something closes, because then that of course leaves less time to get new revenues to pay it off. That's really cutting it very fine. So the state forces you to have all your plans wrapped up 5 years before the end. So for this district, that comes at the year 2027. So you've got a few years to do that. But then you have to make your decision here, not knowing exactly how things are going to shake out towards the end. But that can certainly be done. You can't do it in the last year, say like we've got 36,000 left in the tank, let's find something to spend it on. Okay,
That'd be nice though, if all of a sudden something broke and they had to fix it, you know?
for sure. Any more questions on the cash flows? I mentioned that's the most important piece. All right, so the last page is our timeline. Today, since this is just an amendment, we kind of have a truncated schedule. Usually there has to be a break between this meeting and in the village board. It has to be 2 weeks, but since it's just an amendment, not a creation. We can knock out the initial joint review board meeting, which is the first time the school district, tech college, village board, someone else I forgot to mention, they met earlier today at 1 o'clock, right? So Doug was helpful to be there with us there as well, so you can see the presentation 3 times in 1 day. Anyway, here we have the plan commission meeting. So you guys will consider your resolution to potentially recommend approval for the TID, for the subsequent village board meeting. So that's all on March 21st. That's all today. The next thing is on April 6th, we'll bring the joint review board back together. But here's the plan. If there's any changes that you want to recommend, if the village board had any changes, we have between now and then to figure that out and present to them one last time. So in theory, they, after the 1 o'clock meeting, they all went back to their own agencies. They'll talk it about internally and then get together for the final vote on April 6th. And that should either wrap it up one way or the other. Okay.
So she mentioned a different resolution. Is it gonna be different than the ones that I had for planning commission today? I know it's different than the village board one. Is there gonna be a different one for the joint review board? Or is it gonna be the combination of the two?
Oh, she'll send you another one for the joint review board.
So it is a separate, different
Yes,
one. Okay.
yes. That's all I've got. My contact information is on the back. If anyone has any questions for me or John, please stay in attention.
No, thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. All your questions are totally helpful.
Okay, good. Thanks.
And if nothing else, then I will close the public hearing. We will do a public comment. So close the public hearing at 6:29. Now we will do public comment, 2 minutes per person, 14 minutes per topic. And again, this is for the tax increment district is what we are discussing at this point. Is there any public comment? Okay. Hearing nothing, we'll move on to new business. Discussion possible recommendation, amendment of the boundaries and project plan of tax increment district number 3. Anyone have anything that they want to add to what we heard or any? Or anyone want to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to, raise on the agenda to, go forth with the amended boundaries and projection of the plan of the technical district number 3.
I'll
As
second.
proposed.
I just thought of a question. Is that okay?
Not at this point, sorry.
It was on that corner down. I'll have to ask you.
Yeah, so we can get that. We have first and second on the table. Any other further comments or questions from the commission?
I think in order to, the biggest thing is to get the intersection improved. This would just makes sense to do this.
Agreed.
Well, we first and seconded it already, right?
Well, that's,
There's
well, you
a
still.
discussion afterwards.
So the general plan would be to sell the properties to businesses. And we're not gonna look at building on it at any chance as a village.
Get it back in the tax roll.
Right. Yeah, the goal is to have to get on the tax roll, making money for the district.
The village gonna do taxes done.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'm abstaining.
Okay. Next up, discussion possible recommendation, resolution approving an amendment to the project plan and boundaries of tax increment district number 3.
Well, how does it differ from the first?
So
Boundaries.
this is just in adding the boundaries of the new parcels.
Say it again?
This is, I believe this is just adding the boundaries for the new parcels.
Right.
Now it's the resolution.
Yeah, so the first one was to do the boundaries themselves, and the second was to add it into the entirety of the both together. Is my understanding, Bob? Is that-
Yeah, it's basically just the resolution on it.
Entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to recommend resolution of approving an amendment to the project plan and boundaries of tax incremental district number 3.
Josh, next day second.
First and second, any further comments or questions? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Aye.
Abstaining.
Any opposed of this? Motion carries. At this point, make a motion to adjourn at 6:33 PM.
Josh, next day make a motion.
Second motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned 6:33. Thank you, everyone.
Doug, I think that's yours right there.
Yeah, that's.